Hello and welcome to Things We Said Today, our weekly podcast about anything and everything to do with the Beatles as a group, as solo artists, their past, their present, and this week we're going to talk about things immediately to come. I'm Alan Kozin, the author of The Beatles from the Cavern to the Rooftop, and got that something, how the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, changed everything. I'm joined by my three regular co-hosts, Ken Michaels, who you know is the host of the syndicated radio show Every Little Thing. Hello, Ken.
Hello, Alan. Hi, everybody.
And Steve Marinucci. If we were doing a Kinks show, we would call him the last of the great steam-powered trains, but here we call him the last of the full-time Beatles reporters.
Oh, my God.
That was very clever.
That was clever, especially considering how early I got up this morning. Hello.
Big Kinks fan, what can I tell you?
Yeah.
And Steve is here. We refer to him really as the last of the full-time Beatles reporters. You can read him in Access.com, that's AXS, and in Billboard. He's become effectively their Beatles desk, and all sorts of other places. And if you can't find them all, just follow him on Facebook, and every day he's got links to all of his things. So, hello, Steve.
Hello. Hello, Alan. Hello, everyone.
And last but not least, we have Al Sussman, the executive editor of Beatle Fan magazine and the author of Changing Times, 101 Days That Shaped a Generation. Hello, Al.
Hi, Alan. Hello there, everybody.
Okay, so we've all been spending probably all day today and a lot of yesterday looking at first the trickle of information coming through and now the flood of information coming through about the Sgt. Pepper 50th anniversary set. And so we thought we would actually preempt a couple of shows that we've already recorded and talk about Pepper now, because this is really, I think, so exciting. Anyone disagree?
No,
No.
not at all.
I mean,
you could kind of see things bubbling up last night when the first information leaked. Actually, I think it was yesterday afternoon when the video showed up and the pictures came out yesterday morning, and there was kind of amazement and wonderment if these were real.
Yeah.
And then when the track list popped up late last night, although it didn't have a lot of detail, it was still, kind of wow.
Yeah.
What is going on here? And then when the details came out this morning, it was unbelievable. It really was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing that happened, and this has actually happened in a couple of cases recently, where Amazon apparently jumped the gun a little bit, and before the official announcement even posted the pictures of the 6-disc set.
They posted they had all the pictures up, and then they pulled them.
And then they pulled them, but if you clicked on the thing that said no image available, you got to a page that had the place for the non-image, but they left up there the video that was, I think they're now calling this the unpacking video, where it just gave you a quick overview of what was going to be on this, and it began to seem clear to us, at least, I think, that this isn't a fake, this is too well produced, and someone would have had to have gone to a lot of trouble and expense just to fake this. So I think, I began accepting it as what the set was going to be. And then last night, Amazon in Italy, had the track listing, So, I mean, putting all these things together, and finally this morning the actual press release came through, which explains a lot more in a lot more detail, all the information. And it's, so let's start with, just the formats. I mean, start from the smallest to the biggest. First there is a single CD. Then there is a 2 CD set. And I think we should say the single CD is going to have Giles Martin's new stereo mix. And the new stereo mix is a little odd because he's like he did with the tracks on the One Plus album. They're remixes, but they're remixes guided by the mono mixes of Pepper. Is how you guys all understand it?
Right. I'm looking at the press release here, and that's interesting because if you've been familiar with the bootlegs, there are bootleg versions out there of stereo mixes made from the mono mixes. There is some interesting differences. I mean, you obviously hear things in a different manner on those kind of mixes than you would on the mono mixes, and so and the clip, that video that you were talking about, you definitely can tell something is different there. You definitely could hear what they've done, so
Yeah.
I'm sure that was intentional.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm sure it was too.
And frankly, I don't mind if it is kind of based on the original mono mix, because actually in certain respects I like the mono mix better. Like the She's Leaving Home with the correct speed McCartney vocal, and the smoother bridge between the Sgt. Pepper reprise and A Day in the Life.
Right, and also the effects on John's voice and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I mean, probably like a lot of you, I mean, I got the record when it came out and grew up with it originally in mono. And Lucy in the Sky always sounded very spacey, and then when I got the stereo, it was a lot less spacey.
Yeah.
She's Leaving Home, this is a question what the proper speed is, because what I think happened, I could be wrong, and maybe either Mark Lewison or the Ryan and Kehoe might have discussed this, but what it sounds to me like is the one that we hear on the stereo mix is actually the sort of real key that it's in and speed that it went on. And for the mono mix, I think they sped it up a little bit, what they call sweetening. And it sounds better that way, sped up. It doesn't, in stereo, I really think it's kind of a draggy song, but in mono, it clips along. So I think this has some great potential because we're going to get some of the things from the mono mix that are better than the stereo mix, but we're still going to get a stereo mix. So, and there was
I have to say I disagree about She's Leaving Home there.
Yeah?
I think the slower speed is more appropriate because it is a sad song.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
I've always thought the stereo mix was the proper speed.
Yeah.
So
that's the version that you probably first heard.
Right.
Was the stereo version. Yeah, that's unfortunately that's where you differ from the three of us in that we probably all three of us our first copies were probably the mono.
Yeah,
right.
Mine definitely.
Yeah.
And anytime I heard the song on the radio, I always heard the stereo version.
Yeah.
So
the stereo eventually supplanted the mono as the sort of normal one everybody heard. So we have the mono in stereo mix as the main disc, and that's what you would get if you bought the single CD. There's also a 2 CD version and a 2 LP version, which will have that mix as disc 1. Disc 2 will be sort of an alternate Sgt. Pepper, which is Sgt. Pepper, the songs from Sgt. Pepper in the same sequence as the album, but all as outtakes, including the version of A Day in the Life that ends with the hummed chord. So
nice.
There is some question as to whether everything on the 2 CD set is in the Super Deluxe set. And that's apparently there's some I got to look here at the track list. There's a discrepancy on disc 2 with Lovely Rita speech in take 9. And I've seen people wondering if that is if they're on both sets, because it's on it's listed on the 2 CD set, but it's not on the Super Deluxe. And I made an inquiry today, and I have not heard back, so I don't know. But I would kind of think
it's on CD3. Lovely Rita speech and take 9.
Yeah. People are stupid. I swear. And especially some of the comments that I saw online today. These people they're absolute morons.
Well, let's say that it's a lot of material to assimilate.
Well, yeah, but
Right.
still, why is he Carnival of Light on there? Oh, God, please.
well, listen.
Well, the one I saw a lot of comments about was Carnival of Light,
Right.
Yeah.
which I am not. I'm glad it's not there.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I don't know. I really
couldn't
want
care
Carnival
less.
of Light, and what I think that they should do is that when you buy the deluxe set, there should be a code there, and we should go like Sir Paul has done. We should be able to go online and download Carnival of Light as a WAV file in 4896.
I don't.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm not one that really wants to hear that, though. I really
No,
don't.
me neither.
Why not?
So why are you preventing me and Ken from wanting to hear it?
Well, only because I know what'll happen if it gets out there.
Yeah. People are going to
Because-
say, "Oh, this is awful. This isn't a good song. It's not even a song."
I'm not going to say it like that, but I'm going to just say I think social media would not be very receptive to it, and I don't.
No,
you know,
not at all.
and-
Well, you
and
know what?
music-
People still have problems with Revolution number 9, so they'll just have to catch
Yeah.
up.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
okay, so
Whatever.
we have, we're still just running down the formats.
Yes.
There's the 2 CD, 2 LP, which is going to have, the alternate pepper with, various things on it. We can get into the details later. And then finally, there is the 6-disc Super Deluxe Edition, on which disc 1 is going to be the remix of Pepper, with, everyone was, debating whether or not Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane were going to be inserted into the track listing because the London Times said so sometime last month, but that's not happening. Let's see, discs 2 and 3 are outtakes, in this case arranged chronologically by the earliest recording date. And there are, 15 on disc 3, and different screen, different mouse, and 18 on disc 2. And we'll get into what those are in a few minutes. CD4 is the Mono Pepper, remastered, not remixed, but the original Mono Pepper. That's tracks 1 to 13. Then there is the original mono mixes of Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, an unreleased mono mix of A Day in the Life, previously unreleased, a version of Lucy in the Sky that was thought to have been wiped in 1967, but which they found during the research for this set. Then an unreleased mono mix of She's Leaving Home, and the promo single of Penny Lane, which had the trumpet ending. So,
As a matter of fact,
When-
I just wanted to ask you about something, because actually going back to the second and third discs, there's also the new stereo mix of Penny Lane, and what's listed as, and several times is listed here as the 2015 stereo mix of Strawberry Fields Forever.
well, that means
Which-
from the one album, right?
That's what I'm wondering about. Is that
I
okay.
would think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're up to the final 2 discs in the 6-disc set, which are identical, one Blu-ray, one DVD, but they're going to have a new 5.1 surround mix of all of Pepper and Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields. Well, with the 2015 Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields surround sound mixes and new mixes of the Pepper tracks. And they're going to have high-resolution stereo mixes. So, and the Making of Sergeant Pepper 1992 documentary.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That
Nice.
was a wonderful show.
Yeah.
I remember that from the Disney Channel.
And the promo films for A Day in the Life, Strawberry Fields, and Penny Lane. And that is the complete roundup of the several versions. And I kind of think I might get them all except the single one, the single CD one. I mean, I'm not sure if you're getting any of the others, there's any use having that.
You forgot the box has a lenticular cover and a 144-page hardback booklet.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. And 2 posters and
Yeah.
And the booklet will have some handwritten lyrics, handwritten recording notes. There, you could see in the video that there's a note about the editing of Strawberry Fields. So lots and lots of stuff. Essays from all kinds of people, including our pal Jeff Slate.
Yep.
Kevin Howlett, a few others. And so, it really looks, I think, generally speaking, as an advanced view, this really looks like an incredible set of the sort I really think that they should do and maybe will do for all the others.
Well, that's the thing. You hear about this, and it opens up the floodgates to everything else they could do. And you're wondering, why are they starting with Sgt. Pepper? They could have done this with earlier albums too.
I think if they're indeed starting, if they're starting with Sgt. Pepper, they're doing it because, in fact, in 1987, when the first Beatles CDs came out, Sgt. Pepper was the only one that had its own, the first one that had its own separate release date. It was also the only one that had a new booklet. And it sounded definitely better than the first batch.
The British one had a slipcase even.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And plus, also, it was released on the actual anniversary,
so that
it
they
was
could
kind
say,
of like the centerpiece of the original CDs. And with the subsequent ones, with the White Album and Magical Mystery Tour and
Abbey
Road and all, they went back to the bargain basement packaging that they had done with the earlier ones.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling this may just be the only one that's going to get this kind of treatment.
Maybe it depends on the reception,
Because it's the fact of the matter is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is the most important album in the history of popular music. It has a very unique place. And so I think they realized that and realized it 30 years ago. And so they're giving it its more in this case, they're giving it more than its proper due.
Well, with the original CDs, it's not just that it was the centerpiece. It was, when I interviewed George Martin when the first batch came out, and he was complaining that, they had given the first 4 to him in stereo and said, "What a wonderful job we've done, haven't we?" And he said, "No, I think these should be mono, and I think I should go look at all of these and redo them." And they said, "Well, if you want, we can throw out the first 4 in mono, but we don't have time to let you remix those because we have a schedule which is entirely predicated on Sgt. Pepper coming out on June 1st so that we can say it was 20 years ago today in our ad campaign." So, here you had actually that whole original CD program kind of built around the need to be able to quote a Beatles line in the ad, So, and George Martin was, not that happy about that, but I think he understood that this is the way it has to be. But, I don't know. I don't know if they'll do others. Where the problem is, of course, we are at the end of the physical media world, and the possibility of continuing putting out boxes like this. I kind of would think that this would be a seller, but who knows? Probably what they do is they sit in Apple, and when they put together an idea like this, the first question they ask is, okay, what can we possibly do that will get Alan Kozin to stop complaining about everything we do?
Right.
and they may finally have hit upon it.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Really, this addresses, when people say, "Oh, well, they don't care about the collector and all that." The deluxe box addresses the collector. They're giving us 2 CDs of outtakes, and now there's some questions, of course. Some of these outtakes are things we had on the anthology, and so the question is, are we going to get the same versions as on the anthology, or is Giles going to go back and redo them? And in particular, the one I'm interested in is Take One of Strawberry Fields, because on the anthology they stripped away that gorgeous because-like backing vocal section, those beautiful harmonies. They just aren't on the anthology version. And we know that Giles likes those because he did use them in Love.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of hoping he remixes that and puts those vocals back in there. And he may do some remixes of the other things we know from anthology too, which would mean that we have yet more versions of things. Which is fine with me.
Yeah, I gotta hope that they, number one, they don't do the piecemeal thing that they did with the anthology, where they cut everything and cut things and threw them together, and the way they did those those new outtakes for anthology.
Yeah.
Like
there were some that the cross-faded ones. Like
Good Night.
Good Night. Yeah. I think Yes It Is, maybe.
Yeah, Yes It Is. Yes It Is the one I remember the best that I really couldn't stand. I was really disappointed with that.
But what about the Pepper ones?
I mean, the same thing. I hate to use the word butchering, but the butchering of those outtakes was probably one of the most distressing things about the anthology. That they didn't use they didn't do what the bootleggers did. That was kind of disappointing. There was one point I was going to make. You were talking about whether they'd continue to do this. Number one, you notice they did not do this with Revolver.
Right.
And I think that sends a very clear message that they have a real love for Pepper. I mean, we've always known they have had, and I think the only other album we'd ever get this treatment of would be Abbey Road. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't
know about that. I mean, when you say they, do you mean Paul and Ringo, or the record company, Apple? Who?
Probably. I mean, Apple. I mean, it would have to be Apple, because assuming we don't know if Paul and Ringo will be around when that anniversary comes around, when the 50th comes around.
Well, obviously, Paul is so extremely proud of Sgt. Pepper. But, if you listen to comments from John and from George, John liked other albums so much more than Sgt. Pepper, and thought that, there wasn't really a concept album as it's been portrayed to be, just that you have Sgt. Pepper at the beginning and Sgt. Pepper at the end with A Day in the Life. And he really downplayed Sgt. Pepper. Between John and even George, I think that they've kind of said that the middle period, that Rubber Soul Revolver period, was their favorite. So, I guess between Paul and Ringo, even Ringo, would comment about Sgt. Pepper that there was a moment he was just playing chess, like he wasn't feeling like he was a member of the band during the album.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So definitely with Paul's so extremely proud of Sgt. Pepper, as he should. But I don't know if I would say in general, Apple, all four parties, would say Sgt. Pepper has to be the most important.
Well, they didn't do this with any. I mean, we've passed 50th anniversaries for a number of the albums now, and this is the first one they've done.
And also, of course, nothing comes out without the unanimous vote. We know that.
Right.
For Let It Be and all of that.
Yeah.
So I really think that anybody expecting this kind of treatment for more albums is going to be probably disappointed, because number one, the cost factor, and number two, even though the enthusiasm, I mean, the online buzz on this thing that I've seen since last night has been astounding.
Yeah.
People are absolutely freaking out, and we're talking about people who normally grouse about everything. They are very pleased with this. Very pleased.
Yeah.
I mean, I have seen a couple of snide comments in certain places, but most people are very, very happy with this. And but there's a lot of reasons why it's just not going to happen for every album. It just won't. I wish I could. Number one, you'd have to get people to buy it. Spend $150. That's not going to happen.
I mean, we just got through talking about the future of the McCartney archive collections,
Yeah.
And thinking that that after maybe another, after they get through the '70s Wings albums, that might be it, depending on
If they even get that
the,
far.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Depending on the sales for for Flowers in the Dirt,
Yeah.
they may,
Well, that's something we just don't know.
Yeah.
yeah.
We're just
Well,
guessing at this point. But you're saying that the response to this has been astounding. I guarantee you, if something similar like this, or even if it was a 2 CD package, was put out on Revolver or Rubber Soul,
Yeah.
or anything later, I bet you those Beatle fans would be thrilled to pieces.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So, you shouldn't just limit it to Sgt. Pepper is all that I'm saying.
Well, I still take the tack that Sgt. Pepper is a unique. I mean, Sgt. Pepper is the release of Sgt. Pepper on June 1st and 2nd, 1967 was an event with a capital E. I mean, Bruce Beiser has a book coming out, and the core portion of that book is reminiscences by fans, both well-known and just ordinary fans of their first listen to Sgt. Pepper. Most of them from June of '67. Some later on, but most of them from June 1st and 2nd of 1967. It's probably the first time, there are a lot, those of us who grew up in the 60s, there are a lot of events from the 60s where we can remember where we were and what we were doing when certain things happened. And our first listen to Sgt. Pepper is one of them. Absolutely. And it's and that doesn't really exist with a lot of the other albums. Because it was very unique, and again, it's the most important album in the history of popular music. So it has a very unique place in history. So
Okay.
I think,
well, to counter your point there, that was then. This is now. There are a lot of people today that look at Sgt. Pepper, even though they admire the work and they think it was a great body of work, as being of its time and being dated, and they prefer Revolver or the White Album or Abbey Road. There's nothing wrong with feeling that way. There's no doubt the importance of this album. I'm just saying that I think that it would be wrong not to do similar treatments to some of the other Beatles work. You might argue about the earlier stuff, but certainly once you're getting into more interesting music, more creative music from Rubber Soul on, maybe they could do something like that.
I think they definitely should. And even with the early music, I mean, with the early music, you have the benefit of that being, 2-track and early 4-track recording, where there really are more actual outtakes than there are at this point. I mean, one of the problems that they ran into in the anthology with the stuff from Pepper On, and why I think they did a lot of editing of different takes, is that generally speaking, the way they recorded at that point was, multi-tracking, and if they didn't like something, they wiped it, and so there, in some cases aren't outtakes the way there are on Please Please Me. And so with those, I mean, you have, with the early albums, you at least have a natural way of, filling out discs with outtakes, plus they really would benefit from remixes now. And, I think I also, I understand completely the argument that Al is making about this being the most important pop album of all time. There are people who argue it, but fine. We're looking back as a whole at what really is the most important pop music catalog of all time, and I kind of think that every single one of their albums deserves this kind of treatment, and I wish they had been doing it all along. It could be that within that, Pepper gets maybe more discs than some of the others, and more deluxe treat, whatever. But I really kind of think that it would have made sense for them to have been doing this all along, and now they can go back and do it. I mean, there are other anniversaries coming up, or I think a lot of these things as well are a little experimental. I think Giles doing all of those remixes on the One or One Plus project was in a certain way testing the water. How will people react to remixes? And I kind of think that generally speaking, while there was some carping here and there, I think they were generally well received. And so now we see, okay, here it is a year and a half later, and he's been given the green light to remix Pepper, and maybe if this goes well, he'll be given the green light to remix them all. So who knows? I think there may be more to come. Back to the outtakes aspect. The anthology had 35 minutes worth of Pepper era outtakes, and that includes Only a Northern Song, which this doesn't. So let's say 31, 32 minutes of this material. Just looking at the list, I haven't compared all the take numbers of the anthology things, but just offhand, I see that for Within You, Without You, they give take one, Indian instruments only, and then a take of George coaching the musicians. On Anthology, of course, what we had was the Western Instrument Orchestra, right? So that won't be repeated here, seemingly, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something else. And here we're getting 100 minutes of outtakes versus the 35 on Anthology. So there's, I think, going to be a lot of stuff even those of us who are lunatic bootleg collectors haven't heard.
Mm-hmm. Do you know? There's one thing I noticed, by the way, and I don't know if any of you other guys noticed it. There's no digital for this. It's all physical disc, all CD. They did not announce digital downloads, and I'm looking on iTunes right now, and I don't see a listing for it. That doesn't mean it won't be there, but as of today, there's been no mention of digital downloads for this thing.
Yeah, I bet they will, of course, but
you would think
eventually.
You would think so. You would think so.
And in fact, you'll probably have to buy the iTunes version to get Carnival of Light and a few outtakes if it's only a Northern Song.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Oh boy.
So that'll save you some money, Steve.
Yeah, really. Really.
So my main question here is, what is really repeated from what's on the Beatles anthology that's on here? Because I'm seeing that, being for the benefit of Mr. Kite, they're saying take 7, and take 7 is on the Beatles anthology.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
I wouldn't be surprised if there were a couple of repeats.
Yeah, that's very possible.
Yeah, I think there are. Just don't know which offhand. I think possibly the take 6 of Penny Lane might have been the one. Was that the one on the anthology? I'm not sure. This one says instrumental.
I don't have my copy right handy. But the one thing that the deluxe, the 2 CD listing says is complete early takes. Complete.
Right.
Which there's I think the big difference, and so that will be very nice. I mean, what can we say here? I mean, this thing is just amazing. I mean, at least, what we're looking at, what we think we're looking at is absolutely astounding. So,
I'll tell you what, I've got the anthology stuff here. So I can read these and you can compare them with the list on the
go ahead.
Press release. Okay. So the Strawberry Fields demo sequence is not on the new one. And that's on the anthology. Strawberry Fields Take 1 is, but we have the question about whether it will be a new mix with the vocals reinserted.
Right.
It says Strawberry Fields Take 7 and edit piece, and on the new list they just say Take 7. They don't say anything about edit piece. Penny Lane just says alternate mix. A Day in the Life doesn't seem to give the take number. I think that might have been melding of several different takes, right?
I think so, yeah.
Good morning, take 8.
Take 8 is the one that's on here.
Okay. Only a Northern Song doesn't give a take, but I believe it had a different vocal verse than the released version. Anyway, it's not on here.
Right,
so,
it's not on here.
Right.
Benefit of Mr. Kite, it says takes 1 and 2 and takes 7.
And then it's take 4 on this one.
Okay.
And yeah, okay. No, wait a minute. I thought it said 7 there. Wait a minute.
Yeah, take 4, or at least that's in the press release.
Yeah, but being
Well,
for the
there are
benefit of Mr. Kite, take 7 is in the anthology.
Oh, yeah.
So it's on both. It's on
Yeah.
that and here. Yeah.
Yeah, so, right, being for the benefits, right, take 4 and take 7. So take 4 will be new to us. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, it just says alternate mix.
Right, and that's
Okay.
take 1.
So,
Take
Take
1 is
one
on.
speech at the end, yeah.
Yeah, Within You Without You is the orchestral instrumental, which isn't on the new one. And then Sgt. Pepper Reprise, I don't have a notation for what take or anything, so.
It's take 5
Right,
on the anthology. On the anthology.
Okay,
It's
take
5?
8 is on the new one.
Okay. So, really, we're getting very few repeats, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Few, but not many. Cool.
Yeah, I think this. Yeah.
Alan's happy. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, well I would have thought that we probably would have gotten nothing more than a single CD with the new mix and Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been very surprised with anything beyond that. To get this. And especially to go frankly the McCartney route and go with these various different versions of it, including this Mondo box, which is in fact bigger than any of the McCartney boxes, is very, very surprising. In fact, I mean, it's basically got anything that I would have wanted in a Sgt. Pepper box, except maybe, the handful of songs that they recorded during the Sgt. Pepper sessions that, were later released on the Yellow Submarine soundtrack, and then All You Need Is Love and Baby You're a Rich Man.
Yeah.
And, we have those anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Right. I mean, All You Need Is Love, you could argue, really is post Pepper Sessions, and the only song is the only actual song, not counting Carnival of Light, from the sessions that's missing here is Only a Northern Song, and I would have liked to have heard that on here too, in the same way that Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane are on here, but it's not the worst thing in the world that it's not. I would have argued to put it on if they had asked, but
yeah.
And I would have argued for Carnival of Light too, but maybe it'll be a download. So.
I don't see how anyone can find anything to complain about here. The only thing, when I was envisioning what they might do, and this was like a pipe dream of mine, was to have something like strip down what was done with Double Fantasy, only apply to Sgt. Pepper, and remove a lot of the string sections and the Indian instruments, and just have the band alone. Because one of my absolute favorite things that was on the Beatles anthology was the recording of Good Morning, Good Morning, without all the animal sound effects, and it was just the band and nothing else. And you got to hear the amazing drumming that Ringo had on that song. So to do something like that with Sgt. Pepper, if you could do it, I mean, there are songs like She's Leaving Home, which was just John and Paul's vocals and an orchestra, or was it was an orchestra or a quartet and harp. So if you remove that, then you just have John and Paul's vocals. Mm-hmm. Or Within You Without You, if you took away the Indian instruments and the Western, then you just have George's vocal.
That's all you'd have, yeah.
So, but you could do something with many of the tracks there where it's stripped down so that it's even more raw and basic. And it would be fascinating that way to listen to it. To make a comparison of what it was like in the beginning to what it eventually became.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think people have done that with the Rock Band mixes. Because if I remember correctly, I think there is a Rock Band Sgt. Pepper.
There is.
Yeah, there is.
Right. And so it's the same. You can do that with with those mixes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have that, plus we have those, the 4-track for those 4 songs that, Pepper, with a little help, She's Leaving Home in a Day in the Life. So we already have the means to do our own remixes if we want. So, and who knows?
And there's one other little thing on Record Store Day. April 22nd, there's going to be released a 45 of Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields. Now, I don't know whether it's the new mixes or not, but it will be a 45.
Yeah, there were no details in the press release on that.
Of course,
with the picture sleeve.
Since I still have my copy from 1967, I don't need it.
Yeah, that's true. You do not. Interesting note: the Rolling Stone story on the Sgt. Pepper anniversary uses a Magical Mystery Tour picture.
Oh, I know, and some idiot on the page of Ken's former cohorts said, "Hey, why are you using a Magical Mystery Tour picture? Who cares?" Oh God, people need to, A, grow up, and B, go out and get some fresh air.
I think it's funny, actually, but that's me. But whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Magical Mystery Tour is not a world apart from Sgt. Pepper.
It's
a few months later,
Yeah.
Right.
They look the same.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Anyway.
In fact, actually, the title song actually was recorded during the sessions for Sgt. Pepper. I think the date was sometime in April. So
okay.
I'll check the Lewison book.
Anywho, I guess we give this all a big super plus.
Oh, absolutely. This is much, much more than I would have expected. Absolutely.
You gotta wonder where the idea or where the how this developed. With the other reissue projects that we've talked about that we haven't been as happy with, why this one went the way it did.
Well, it's possible that the McCartney series has been, considering that, one of the votes at Apple is indeed the same guy. I think probably the McCartney series may have been a factor. I wouldn't be at all surprised.
There's no topic we have discussed more on this show than what Apple should do, and what they haven't been doing.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that so many times, and how many times have we said they have never thought about the hardcore fan? And yet at the same time, when we take a look at certain releases that we think would do really well, that would cater a lot to the hardcore fan, they haven't been. So, I mean, something like the Beatles 1+, and I know we've talked about this a lot, but I immediately thought, oh, that's going to explode. All the videos and everything, and it didn't. So I don't know. And yet, when I remember the comments that I think Alan made about something Paul had said, maybe it was when you were interviewing him, Alan, but Paul was always worried about when alternate takes came out of Beatles songs, and young fans would buy it and be confused as to whether or not those are the real versions.
Right.
And yet, this comes out. So, but then again, who's going to buy this? Who's going to buy the Super Deluxe? It's going to be the hardcore fan that knows all this stuff anyway. So, and yet the Beatles also prevented the bootleg series coming out of each year after 1963. So if they were against that, and yet they're doing this, sometimes it doesn't make any sense.
That's an interesting point. I wouldn't have. That's.
Well, of course, this is a 4-pronged release. For the casual fan, there is simply the single CD.
Right.
Yep.
And the new mix will not replace the old one, because they still have the 2009 remaster, and that's the official mix. This new mix is not the official mix anymore. I mean, it does not become the official mix. But
I think it's interesting that the official mix is not included in the set, and you could argue that both ways. I mean, it could be that anybody who would buy this set absolutely already has at least one copy of the official mix. I was, if you probably saw on Facebook, the other day I went through and counted. I've got at least 21 copies of the official mix. I mean, that includes mono ones too, includes picture disc, it includes a cassette, and it includes an iTunes download. Well, that's an official release, you know. So the only thing
you don't have the 8-track, do you?
I don't have the 8-track or the open reel. And Bill King
what is
and I
wrong
were.
With you, Alan?
Bill King was saying that.
I saw what he said.
I have located them both on eBay. The problem is, of course, if I get the 8-track and the open reel, I will then have to get them for the entire series. Whereas at the moment, I could say that I'm really only collecting vinyl and CDs, and that the iTunes and the cassette that I have are sort of outliers. But yeah. Right, so I've got like 21 of them, and this is going to make, I guess, it's going to bring it up to 25. But still, I mean, for the sake of completeness, in a way, you kind of think, okay, we're getting the original mono mix, we're getting all these other mixes and things. Maybe we should have had the stereo mix in here somewhere, but I'm not too concerned about that.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that if they had put the original stereo mix in, there would have been that many fewer outtakes.
Yeah. Also, though, and I imagine that this is a matter of it being much easier to market and manufacture, but discs 5 and 6 are identical. One's Blu-ray, one's DVD. And I think maybe they could have had a Blu-ray version and a DVD version and had either a different disc 6 or just made it 5 discs.
Yeah, I wondered about that too, actually. I wondered why they did that.
Probably because it's easier to stock, you know. It's easier to just have a unified package,
right?
You know, than to have to order Blu-ray and order DVD.
Also, there's still a lot of people that only have DVD players that don't have Blu-ray players.
Right. So if they bought the DVD version, you know, look, everything until now has come out separately as a DVD or a Blu-ray, like the movie, the tour movie, and the One Plus.
One Plus.
You could get that either way. So here they're giving you both, and I think it's mainly in order to not have to double stock. You know, the way the industry was with mono and stereo. You know.
And actually, I think that's a trend now because, for instance, for people who are baseball fans, the 2016 World Series film, when that was released in December, that was released in a package with with one disc for Blu-ray, one disc for DVD.
Yeah,
so
and I think Star Wars Rogue One is that way too, actually.
Yeah, it is. We just picked it up yesterday, and yeah, it is. There's a lot of movies coming. Some of them you can get them. You know, you can still get the single DVDs, and they're cheaper. But there are a lot of movies now that have dual packages, and also include the ultraviolet streaming version. So they do that now.
And we shouldn't neglect the fact that the making of Sgt. Pepper is on here, because I think that's an inspired choice, because at that, when that was made, obviously George Harrison was still alive.
Right.
Sir George
and
Martin
so is George Martin. George
still
Martin.
alive. And Paul and Ringo's memories were probably maybe a little sharper than they are now.
Mm-hmm.
So and plus it was also very, very well done. I'm assuming that it'll be the full version and not the sanitized one that Disney ran.
Right. Yeah, that's what people were suggesting yesterday. They were hoping that the UK version is the one we get.
I have a feeling it probably is.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Just the fact that it never came out commercially, makes it even more appealing.
Yeah,
and it hasn't been televised all that much.
Right.
No.
Here. So, it's a welcome addition here.
The audio was bootlegged, but the audio was bootlegged in mono. And that will be another thing, because it was originally in stereo, because I remember hearing it on the Disney Channel in stereo. And I remember when the bootlegger put out the double disc of the soundtrack, it was only mono. It was like, I wondered about that. I wondered why they did that. But now you'll get to hear that in stereo.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and if you remember, there was that whole segment in there with George Martin at the board at Abbey Road, and going through, taking each of the tracks, since this incredible album was recorded on 4 tracks, which is something that I always emphasize, which was an absolute miracle given what it sounds like. And going through all the different tracks and showing how these songs were constructed.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
Wasn't that the first time we saw anything like that with Beatles music?
Yeah,
where George Martin was
first one I saw.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
Yeah,
to see them at the mixing board and to play with the faders and to isolate certain tracks, and that was just wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was 3 years before the anthology, where he did a bit of that too. But
that was kind of the experiment for that whole thing, to see if people would go for it, and they did, and that's what led to the a lot of the other things. The Yellow Submarine soundtrack came after that. I think partially because of that. So
and even right up to date, things like sound breaking.
Yeah. I mean, with the Yellow Submarine soundtrack was also the first we heard that they had gone back to all of the 4-track pre-bounce down masters and had synced them all up on multi-track digital, so that all of the tracks of Sgt. Pepper were available for remixing without being locked into what happened when they bounced them down, because once they combined, say, the rhythm section and a couple of other tracks, move them to a single track on another 4-track tape so that they could add more instruments, that original mix of the rhythm section, etc., that's locked in. You can't reconsider it. Yeah. But now, they've gone back. They've got all of the original tapes from before the mix downs, and so the entire album can be remixed as if it was done on a 16-track. And
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's so amazing.
And so that means that the generation loss that was inherent in the original Sgt. Pepper isn't going to be in the remix. We're going to be getting a mix of basically first-generation sound on every single instrument. So, and from what Ringo said in, there was this tweet from, I think, was it Keith Allison over the weekend that Keith Allison tweeted about being at Ringo's house when the package came and listening to it and hearing the drums and bass were a bit louder than they had been, more present, which of course we also heard on the One Plus album. And I think, if you're being cynical, you could say, well, isn't it funny that the 2 living Beatles happen to be more in focus now? But they were always complaining about lack of bass and drums on vinyl pressings back in the 60s. Yeah. And so I think they're now getting their wish, being able to redo it in this way.
And still, the original mix is still available.
Still available.
So for those
that's not going anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and apart from the new mix, I'm going to be interested in hearing the 5.1 surround.
Yeah.
I hope he does a bit more with it than he did in the One Plus mixes, which were still mostly stereo with a little bit of ambience in the back, if I recall correctly. I think with Pepper, there's an opportunity. I mean, we're talking about psychedelia here. You kind of want stuff swirling all around you. So, or something.
Yeah.
Depends on the track, of course, but,
Right.
Kind of want to be in the middle of all those instruments on Within You, Without You.
Yeah.
So.
True.
Yeah, for those of us who have 5.1 systems, which is not all of us.
So
I think Alan, you should have a listening party at your house.
Okay.
Yeah, really.
5.1.
We'll all come up to Maine, and
Well, actually, I know a guy who has a recording studio here who did a listening party with the OnePlus album. Maybe he'll do another one with this. That would be nice because it's like right in a studio. Really great speakers, and you get to know all of the local Beatles guys too, which is kind of fun. So,
Yeah,
some of them are composition professors. I mean, it's very funny. So, okay, I enjoyed having a look at all this stuff. It's really been sort of a day and a half of dealing with all this, and it was fun talking to you guys about it. I think we're all eagerly anticipating it and knowing that it's like a month and a half away. I'm not sure quite how we'll get through that, but we will.
Actually, that's another little point, is that this is going to be almost like a miniature version of the wait we had for the actual album.
Yeah,
which was this torturous wait that we had because of the fact that it had been 10 months since the last Beatles album, which in those days was an eternity.
right.
And especially having gotten the appetizer of Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields,
Right.
it made the wait that much more torturous. So this will be kind of like a mini version of that.
And for some of us, we had a listen or two of A Day in the Life when an acetate got out and got onto New York radio stations.
Yeah.
It was quickly suppressed, but...
yes, very quickly suppressed.
Yeah. Okay, so we should mention that the release date is May 26th, not June 1st or June 2nd, the actual release date. No idea why they've done that. Anyone have any ideas?
I think it's because Friday is now the standard release date. And never the twain shall meet. Whereas in, I guess, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, they did make it, an exception. Yeah. And released it on June 1st and June 2nd.
And also, this way they have it out before the anniversary rather than after. So, yeah, I think that's the reason.
Okay, so we'll wrap this up for this week, and next week and the week after we will be talking about the new Flowers in the Dirt reissue. We're just awash in deluxe reissues these days.
Let's keep it coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So
we need more.
Absolutely. So if you want to write to us, you can contact us at thingswesaidtodayradioshow@gmail.com. You could follow us on Twitter at thingswesaidfab. We have a Facebook page, which is Things We Said Today Beatles Radio Fans. All of us have our own Facebook pages under our names, and mine also under Alan Cozen Remixed. And beyond that, Steve, where can people find your work?
Billboard and Access.com, and soon somewhere else where I will hopefully have a story in Goldmine pretty soon.
Okay.
So, that's right, yeah.
And you also have your Beatles news page, right?
I have my Beatles News Insider blog, yes.
Okay. And Ken, what have you got coming up?
Well, you can always reach me at my email address, which is everylittlething@att.net. Then there's my website, kenmichaelsradio.com. And speaking of Flowers in the Dirt, I do have copies to give away of the special edition of Flowers. And you have a choice of either getting the CD or the vinyl. And that's one of 9 amazing prizes on my Beatles trivia and games page. Check that out. You'll be surprised at all the great stuff that's available there that you could win. Everything from the 8 Days a Week Blu-ray. I still have 1 copy left of the Beatles OnePlus. Pure McCartney, all kinds of great releases on there. And I want to just make sure that I do say that I will be appearing on a really great show, Ghostie's Vintage Pop and Rock Shop, which is on WFDU, that's Fairleigh Dickinson University's radio station, this Sunday, April 9th at 2 p.m. And I'll be talking about my 35th anniversary doing my Beatles radio programs. And I'm pretty sure we talk about Things We Said Today, the show, during the program. So if you can, give it a listen. It's this Sunday on WFDU.FM at 2 p.m., and that's Eastern Standard Time. So, and Ghosty is an incredible interviewer. I had a blast being on his show, so if you can, check that out.
Okay, so for Ken Michaels, Steve Marinucci, and Al Sussman, I'm Alan Kozin saying thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.